Hi, everyone. My name is Thomas Potts, and I'm an assistant director for experiential learning here at the Emerson Los Angeles program. Emerson College is a media and communications focused college whose main campus is in downtown Boston. Emerson Los Angeles is a semester away program where Emerson students come to LA to study. Our building on Sunset Boulevard, situated between Gower and Bronson, features both a residence hall and classrooms, so students both attend class and work in internships during their time here. So tonight, we're very excited to be hosting a panel of producers and crew from the Caine Mutiny court-martial, which is in production now. This is really fascinating to me because I myself am a Navy veteran and I've served aboard 2 ships when I was in the service, so I know the story very well. And this book is essential reading for all officers. I've read the book, I've seen the Humphrey Bogart movie, and I'm really curious to see how they've updated it for modern times. But enough about me. We're very grateful to the California Film Commission for connecting us with the production. And I'd like to thank Jerem Schwartz in particular for making tonight possible. I'd also like to thank Shannon Swanson from the production supervisor, who organized this panel and is going to be our moderator tonight. So thank you both, and looking forward to a great panel discussion. So our plan tonight is that Shannon will introduce the panel, start the discussion with a few questions of her own, and then we'll open it up to students with their questions. So with that, Shannon, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. So the Caine Mutiny court-martial, I'll tell you all a little very brief thing about our film just to introduce it. As he said, the film is based on a novel by Herman Wouk from 1951, and it was adapted into a feature film twice. So the first one was the Humphrey Bogart version, the second one directed by Robert Altman, and then our version is directed by William Friedkin, who is an Academy Award-winning director of The Exorcist and The French Connection, of many wonderful movies. Our version is starring Kiefer Sutherland, Jake Lacey, and Jason Clarke. We had about 8 weeks of prep. We planned on 15 days of filming. This is our day 13, so we've actually already wrapped for the day. And we will have about 2 weeks of a wrap, and then we'll be in post-production. So that's just a little bit of context there. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, I'd like to introduce Annabelle Dunne, our producer. Annabelle is a producer of both documentary and scripted film. She has 2 Emmy nominations, and some of her credits include Everything is a Copy, Joan Didion, The Censure Will Not Hold, and Fake Famous. And Annabelle, if you say hello, I think
hi,
it's pinned on me. Awesome. Thank you. Just in case I was pinned for some reason. Our EP line producer in UPM, Mike Upton. Mike is a former executive of Lionsgate, 2929, as well as Concord New Horizon with the famed filmmaker Roger Corman. He's worked on nearly 100 films, and some credits include John Wick, Aquila and the Bee, How to Be a Latin Lover, and We Own the Night. And our production,
nice to meet everybody.
Our production designer, Kirk Petrucelli. Kirk is an accomplished production designer with work spanning multiple genres. Some notable credits include Moonfall, White House Down, and The Incredible Hulk. He's a graduate of Penn State, and he studied film, design, and illustration.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Our chief lighting technician, Len Levine. Len recently told me that he has always wanted to work in lighting ever since he was in school. So after years of honing his craft, he's been on the recent films he's done has been Avatar, The Way of Water, Marriage Story, the series Black Monday. He just published an article actually in American Cinematographers magazine about collaboration and the collaboration involved for lighting the movie Avatar. So I'll put that in the chat before this is all over.
Hey, y'all.
And our sound mixer, Reginald Bryant, as we know him, Reggie. Reggie's a member of the Cinema Audio Society. He's worked with Disney, Nickelodeon, and some of his credits include Big Time Rush, Ned's, Stuck in the Middle, Alien, Terminator, Best Foot Forward for Apple TV, and the soon-to-be-released film, The American Society of Magical Negroes.
Hello, everyone.
And our editor, Darrin Navarro. Darrin is a veteran motion picture editor who's worked with prominent indie filmmakers like Azazel Jacobs, James Ponsoldt, and Sean Heder. Some of his best-known titles are the critically acclaimed series Little America and his collaborations with our Oscar-winning director, William Friedkin, on his previous films, Bug and Killer Joe. All right, thank you all. So our first question is, what is your role on the production? And what departments do you collaborate with a lot? And what departments do you work with very closely? So would you like me to call, or would you like to just take turns answering?
Sounds like call on us.
Okay,
I'll start.
great. Reggie, kick us off.
I'm the production sound mixer. So the departments that I would be working with a lot would be definitely production, knowing what we're going to be shooting, when and where, so that I can figure out what kind of equipment I have to get. Also, wardrobe is very important to sound, because when you have to hide the microphones, you need to know what someone's wearing and what problems you might foresee happening, and maybe even get ahead of the game and have them put holes somewhere or something like that, so that when it comes time to shoot, no one's waiting on you, because no one wants to wait on sound. I've heard that all the time. And then some other things might be, the production design too, because if the things are making noise or whatever, like sometimes we might have music and something, and if it makes a lot of vibration and things, we might have to batten things down, or might have to change look at something. But there's something that happens all the time that's different. The grips are very important, because you got to move things around, and I have a department of 3 people, but they might have 6 or 7, so you might have to make friends with them to make sure that you can get what you need, and to, well, like I say, keep the things moving. That's the main thing. You got to keep going, keep the show on the road.
Awesome. Annabelle, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I'm a producer. So we work across all of the departments, every single one. And we really try to make sure that the director's vision is executed at every step of the process. So we work to hire all the key department heads that the director wants to work with, that are going to be good creative collaborators for he or she. And then we work very closely in the prep leading up to it across the board to make sure everybody hopefully has what they need to do their job well. And then we're there throughout the process to facilitate anything that comes up, anything they might need, any issues that arise, any changes. We're really across the board from start to finish.
Thank you. Mike, would you like to go next?
I come in typically, after the producers and director and, maybe some of the cast are attached to the project. I come in typically to do plans for the project, kind of in the early stages, figuring out where we're going to be shooting. Are there tax credits that we can apply for? Do the budgets, schedules, trying to hit a number. From there, we start location scouting, figuring out where we're going to be on certain days, crew up, from every department. And from there, we kind of are the hub. So in production, we are constantly dealing with different departments on purchase orders or check requests or contracts or day-to-day schedules, that kind of stuff. I have a team of people that work with me. Shannon's like my right hand, accountant's kind of my left hand. We approve the, expenditures that are happening on the project, mini reports. Anyways, but it's always about trying to make sure that people are following through on, expenditures or whatever the plan is for the day.
Yes. Len, would you like to go next?
Hey there. So yeah, I'm Len. I do lighting. I would consider myself one of the last dogs to the ball as far as collaboration. Everybody's put the whole show together, and then we come in a little bit after Like Kirk has designed the movie already. It's been written. That Kirk and the DP have talked together, and collaboration is kind of the name of the game for me. I've got to listen to the director talking to other people and see kind of. There's a lot of second guessing in what I do. I don't have the canvas to start. It's just all trying to figure out how to help everybody. So I work with the designer on this particular project. Kirk had made a beautiful model of the set in SketchUp, including there were people in there. Everybody, I mean, you can actually get in and set up your shots in there. So I took that model and I went ahead and built the stage around it, and I built a lighting rig around it. But without that, I would have had to just imagine how to light the set. So I went ahead, we started with the SketchUp model. I did a Vectorworks thing. And then I have my rigging team, and we got in a little bit before Christmas. And the idea was I can ask for anything I want, but there's a giant cost attached. So actually I was on the phone more with Mike than I was with Kirk or the DP, because we can ask for whatever we want, but it has to get paid for. So we are dependent on everybody. So I have my plans. I need the grips to help put it together. I have an electrical team that cables everything. I have a data team that is in charge, because the way the lights are now, it doesn't matter if you put a light up and you power it. You have to be able to, it's got a brain, so you have to send a data signal to it. Who else do I have? I got transpo, I got locations, I got sound department to tell them that I got lights with fans and they have to help me out. Is this okay? Visual effects. If I've got lights and reflections that I can't take out, this show is probably going to have very little in the way of visual effects. Kirk designed a few of the windows, because it's a lot of windows. A few of them would gimbal, so our lights would not be in the shot. Anyway, I've talked enough.
I love it. Thank you, Len. And Kirk, why don't you go next?
I'm Kirk. I'm the production designer, and I'm one of the first people brought onto the project. I had an early conversation with Annabelle and Mike, and then Billy himself. And what I do is I just listen. First thing I do is listen. I listen to the story that Billy wants to tell. I look at the budget that everybody wants to operate under, and then I work with everybody on the crew. So it's one of those wonderful joys I have, is that I get to interact with everyone. It starts at the top with Billy creatively. We then take all the dream that Billy has and then translate it into all the other ways of presenting the film. Physical space, digital space, and all the technologies, craftsmen, craftspeople, and labor force that actually is hired downline to get everything to happen. And within a 15-day shoot over the course of 6 weeks, we have to make decisions early. We have to design scenery, or basically in this case, it's a courtroom. The story is about several people with a very pressure-packed courtroom drama. So we had to create the space in which to tell that story. And I work with set designers and modelers, people from the architectural background, and myself, I'm trained that way. And we just create a space that works for Billy's storytelling, and then export that down, throughout the teams that we have. It starts with Mike Grady, our director of photography. And then I have a team that works with set decoration, with the construction methodology. We work with Mike and Annabelle very closely with money, because we spend a lot of money very quickly up front. And we have to calculate that in advance to understand what it is that we're up against. And then as we move forward, as we develop the set on stage, then we work with Reggie, Len, and countless other artists and technical specialists to make something wonderful happen from a very efficient manufacturing-based workforce. And then in 15 days, should the good fortunes and everybody work together to do something spectacular, we finish, wrap it up, and then take it away. So it's inception to completion is what my role is.
Thank you, Kirk. And Darrin, our editor, he'll be finishing the movie. Can you finish this part up?
Yeah, I'm the editor, and so I'm one of the few sort of department heads, along with the producers, who will be present for both production and all of post-production. So during production, I might be in touch with almost any department. I'm talk to the producers frequently, but I'm most likely to be dealing with the script supervisor, who is keeping detailed logs every day of what's being shot in a variety of forms meaning actual forms and also just types. And I'm really going to be using those documents a lot through my process. So she and I are in touch frequently about how those are being prepared and making sure that they're accurate. I will talk to Reggie frequently, the sound guy, about miking issues and things like that. I like to work with all the sound channels that Reggie is recording and that any sound recordist is making for me on whatever show. So we're in touch about some both technical and creative questions in that regard. And in terms of making sure that we have all of the shots that we need. I'm also frequently in touch with the director, of course, and the assistant director about, hey, maybe we could use an additional shot here or there. Oops, I think we have a mistake in this scene. Maybe we need to go back and pick this up, and making sure that something like that gets on the schedule before we lose a location or before we lose an actor. And then in post-production, I will work with pretty much exclusively with the director for a number of weeks before we circle back and bring back the producers, and then expand the post-production team at that point to include sound editors, composers, in some cases visual effects artists. Again, I think someone said, Len mentioned we probably won't have many visual effects on this, but when I'm on a production that does involve visual effects, I'm in touch with that department, and I'm really there to kind of be the creative through line alongside the director from the finish of shooting until we have a completed showable version of the movie or the TV show.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so this next question, what was your first job in Hollywood? And I don't know if you prefer me to call or you guys just want to.
I nominate Mike Upton.
Oh, you're on mute. Thank you.
Mike started in the silent era, which is why we can't hear him.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, right on. I went to the University of Texas, studied film there, was working for a company called Film Dallas at the time. They were doing a project with a producer named Julie Corman. There was a guy who was her assistant that was taking a work print from New York where they were editing through Dallas so to do a telecine, so that Film Dallas would have a copy of the project. And my job was to run him around and take him to lunch while they were doing this. It was taking 3 or 4 hours to do. And at lunch, he was like, oh, I work for this company called Concord New Horizons. It's a legendary filmmaker named Roger Corman. Currently, we are working on a movie called The Nest, which was about giant cockroaches. And he was like, you should come and work for us. And so I showed up in Los Angeles 2 weeks later, and I was like, I'm here to work in the film business. And the guy named Adam Moss said, that's great, we don't have any jobs, but if you'd like to be an intern, you can be a carpenter. And so my first job was working as a carpenter building sets. And I worked for that company for 8 years. I did still photography, became an assistant director, and ended up running the studio for a while. Anyway, it's Roger Corman.
That is an epic first job to go from that to then how it ended. Next, I'm gonna have Kirk go. Kirk is gonna have to unfortunately leave a little bit early. So Kirk, I'd love to hear your first job.
My apologies, I've got some issues back at the set. But my first job was actually shooting. I was a cinematographer. Most of the school projects that I went to Penn State, graduated with 7 people. All 6 of us are still in Hollywood working. And we've all remained close, and we've all journeyed along the way for 35 years. And yeah, I drove trucks. I was a free location intern. I was a focus puller. I did a lot of low budget, very, very small budgeted things to start, to learn the crafts and see what it was that's intriguing to me and what was I good at. And it ended up being that someone invited me to a very small film years ago to design a rooftop in my backyard. And I ended up doing that, pulling trucks up and doing it and figuring things out myself. And I'm a self-taught architect. And from there, it's just being lucky enough to meet people who believe in you and allow you to try. And once you succeed, it may give you another opportunity to do it again or try something different. But it's a long journey ahead, and it's been a ton of fun. And I meet incredible people as you're meeting today. And that's just one of the many wonderful things about this game.
Thank you, Kirk. Thank you for your time joining. Len, what was your first job, Len?
My first job was a low budget movie called Massive Retaliation. I was a PA working for free, as we often do at the beginning. And I kind of knew right before it started, I kind of knew I did want to do lighting. So when I went in there, I was always hanging out with the lighting people, like a real pain in the butt, I'm sure. Like, get away from me, kid. But the gaffer at the end of the job asked me to go to Colorado with him and work in his rental house. So I started there. Loading trucks, driving trucks. I'd work 20-hour days, and then I'd go home and read catalogs. I was a little bit of a nutcase. I was really into it. Still am, actually. Anybody who sees me work, I am still pretty into it.
That's awesome. Reggie, would you like to go?
Yeah, my first job was, I had been appraising real estate, and it did not like the borrow from Peter to pay Paul aspect of that business. And just fell into meeting a friend of mine whose brother was working on a on a photo shoot, and his name was Kinsella. And I said, "Are you related to Mike Kinsella?" He said, "Yeah." And so he said that in addition to doing this photo assistant, he was also a location scout. And I said, "What do you do as location scout?" And it sounded just like when you find comparables if you're appraising real estate. And I said, "Wow, I think I could do that." So then he says, "Well, if I'm on a movie and they need somebody, then I'll put your name in there or whatever." So about 3 or 4 months after that, he said, "Hey, there's this Bill Cosby movie in up in the Bay Area." That's when Bill Cosby was okay to work with him. And they said that they needed some people to find some locations. So me not knowing anything at all, they gave me the hardest stuff. Like the first thing I had to find was a Mediterranean villa that went 3/4 of the way around a black bottom swimming pool. And I go, "Oh, okay, fine." So then I go talk to my real estate connection. They said, "Oh yeah, this person has it, that person has it." So I brought like 3 examples in on the first day, and I could see that their eyes kind of widen out a little bit. And so then they kept giving me, stuff to find, and I kept exploiting the connections I had, and I kept bringing them more and more stuff. And then when it come time to lock down on locations and actually start filming, they asked me if I wanted to be the assistant location manager. So my first job was actually in locations, and it's one of those things where like you're kind of the first one there and last one to leave in a lot of aspects, and so you really get to learn a lot. And you've got to deal with everyone, the crew, and the public. So you really see how the film business impacts virtually everybody. And I have to mention one other thing too. In my credits, it said Alien Terminator. And that was when I met Mike Upton. And that was back in the Corman days. So I have to give a little shout out to that.
That's so awesome. And Darrin.
Yeah, I also began at Corman. My first few jobs actually were entirely through my film professors at LACC. They were all independent filmmakers who were working in a very, very low budget realm, exploitation, stuff for the overseas market. And they would teach, on the side because, it's not lucrative. And so my very first job was a friend of a professor and so I was connected through the professor, and that was at Corman. There's a movie called Monks of Blood. And then probably and I wasn't even paid for that one. That was just 2 weeks of me just total intern volunteering in an editing room, just filing trims, which is, a term that we used back when we were actually editing on film. And then I did a few more jobs like that, often for the professors themselves, helping them on with the films that they were doing, a few days here and there, syncing dailies, things like that. And then I strung enough of those together that and began doing similar work, just directly for some of these low budget production companies like Transworld and Epic that were operational in the 80s. And then my first film, within 2 or 3 years, I think I got my first film on a studio affiliate. I got my first job on a studio affiliated movie, and that was Darkman, a Sam Raimi film in the late 80s, early 90s. So that was, that kind of describes the first few years of my piecing together jobs, and also doing, other just temp work and, day jobs in the meantime to kind of make ends meet.
Awesome. I love all the Roger Corman connections. Annabelle.
So I could tell you about a bunch of PA jobs, but that you've heard before. Actually, the first job that I really learned about Hollywood was I was 25 and I worked for a magazine called Vanity Fair for many years, which some of you may be familiar with. I'm 41. This was a while ago. Magazines were very cool and they had a lot of money, and Vanity Fair threw a party every year for the Oscars, and we would all decamp to LA and work in what was called the War Room, which was a room set up at the Beverly Hills Hotel where we lived for like weeks. I called it jury duty, but fancy, because you wouldn't leave the hotel. And that's how I learned who every single studio head was and their assistant's name, who every head of the talent agencies, Brian Lord, this is who he's married to, his assistant name, all the actors, all the casting directors, all of the movie business people, and then you deal with them coming through the door. So I probably handed Billy Friedkin and his wife, Sherry Lansing, their dinner table thing 10 years in a row. And you know all of their names. You see who is nice and who is really difficult. Because it's the hardest ticket to get into town. So for weeks, you'd be dealing with the phones ringing off the hook. So-and-so needs to bring a guest. No, Tom Cruise can only bring +1. Final word. There was like all these rules, people's bodyguards, their dietary restrictions, and then they would come to the party, and if they couldn't get in, or they were trying to crash, or they were trying to bring a bunch of people, you just saw it all. And the way that people treat you at the door when you're a door girl tells you everything you need to know about if you want to work with them or not. So you just never know, but it was such a great way to see what's behind the scenes and who actually runs the town and who has, power.
That sounds like you have so many more stories. So
Can
now,
I jump in just really
yeah,
quickly?
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. I
Of
just have to.
course.
Listening to everybody else's story, what I think is interesting is that, they always say, well, it's like who you know, right? But I think it is a lot about who you meet, who you do like keep up relationships with, right? But it's not like the people who are all, the same kind of people, right? But it is very much about developing relationships, getting to know people, having an interest in what they do so that they then share that information with you.
Yeah, that's really true. Sometimes those connections that aren't as strong can be the biggest opportunity, just meeting people, connecting with them. So thinking about your first job, what would be something now, knowing what you know now? Is there a piece of advice that if you could go back and tell your former self when you first were starting in Hollywood, is there something you wish you could tell yourself now? Or tell yourself then, excuse me.
I got a really good piece of advice early on, which was when you're trying to get something going, just start the movie, which I think is great advice, which is that if you can get the money together and you can get the crew together, just get going so that you build up your momentum. And once you're shooting, it's so much easier to keep going than it is to kind of agonize over all these little details, and people can get really in the weeds on little things. So it's really good if you're ready to, you just go. Pretty simple, but I think that's proven true for me.
Yeah, that's pretty close to what I was going to say. I'm assuming that a lot of the people who are attending have their sights set on sort of more above the line roles, I think, as we all do when we start, directing, writing, producing. And certainly the directors and producers who I've worked with who have had the most success have been people who do exactly what Annabelle just said, which is that they don't wait for permission, or they don't wait to cross some imagined threshold before getting started on the thing that they want to do, the project that they want to make. In fact, it almost doesn't even occur to them to do that. They just do it because they're compelled to, because they almost feel like they don't have a choice but to. The directors and producers I've worked with went off and as soon as they could put together $10,000, they figured out that how to use $10,000 to make a low budget feature film on film that was borrowed, with a crew that would join them for a number of crazy weekends and put together their first film, and without looking for some kind of official infrastructure or permission to make that happen. Guys, I work with directors and writers who get up at 5 a.m, even though they have 3 kids, and they write from 5 a.m. until 8 a.m, until they have to take the kids to school, and then come back. As soon as they have the house quiet, they write for another hour and a half. They fill every space with the work. Every free moment with the work, in a way that is almost that they couldn't help it if they wanted to. And I think if I had known that, I'm perfectly happy with the way my career has gone, but I think that was something that I had to become aware of in terms of the people who found that kind of success.
I agree. I think that the industry has a tendency to sort of pigeonhole people, right? To where it's like suddenly you're headed down this one path and you're like, wow, that's not really what I wanted to do, right? And it's people that I know that want to be directors, it's my advice to them always is you just have to go direct, right? I don't care what it is, but it's like a muscle that you're using, and if you're not using it every day, then people just don't like come up and say, today you're going to be the director or today you're going to be the producer, and you do just have to sort of make it happen for yourself.
Jumping in here, just to keep timely here. One other question: what are some challenges that you deal with on a professional set that you don't think you'd see on a student film set? Yes, Reggie.
Oh, I think that probably the biggest difference I found is the egos. I mean, if you're doing like some medium or lower budget shows, they have to use the budget to kind of pay for as much talent as possibly can get, which means you get a little bit less on the crew side, so they may not be quite as experienced, and then if something goes wrong, like, a person might take a lavalier and like they might tape it to their chest hair, and then when they take it off, it rips, and they go, they can feel it and go, "Ow, hey, what are you doing? How come we can't get this together?" And it's like, what you want to say is, because you took all the money for yourself. So I don't have an experienced boom operator who's, had 10 years of experience. I got somebody I'm training them, but you can't say that. But if I can just say one thing about the advice thing, it's really quick. The best advice I ever got, though, was from a location manager who was trying to hire me away from the very first movie I worked on, that Bill Cosby movie, to go and work on Tucker. But I said, no, these people gave me my shot, so I'm going to stay with them. And he says, this is what he said. He said, be on time, be liked, be well liked, and don't say no, offer alternatives. That has been the most incredible advice. It works for life. It works that you want to say to other people. But that especially that last one, don't say no, offer alternatives. You can always find someone to say no. You can go to the bus station and someone can say no all day long. Why would you pay them?
Thank you, Reggie. That's really great advice. And you do all those things. You do. Well, I had one other question to ask, and then I think Thomas is going to open it up for some students to ask some questions. So this last question, can you speak to the diversity of the crew that is working for you in production? And in your hiring, how do you seek to increase diversity, equality, and inclusion? Have you seen this improving in Hollywood? And what should be done to make it better?
Yeah, I can speak to it a little bit. I've only got one person working for me right now, and just because of the kind of shows that I tend to work in episodics, and I tend to do sort of indie level films. So I'm usually only working with one assistant. I haven't found that I, at least for the last 10, 12 years, had to do much of anything or take any special measures to ensure that there's been a diversity in the people that I work with. Very often, I don't even have a whole lot of choice. By the time I'm done collecting a few resumes for a particular job and figured out what people's schedules are and narrowed it down to the people who are actually qualified. Sometimes I'm really only talking to one or two people before making a choice. I'm not choosing from among 10 or 12 possible candidates. Very often I'm like, oh, you're available and you know how to use the Avid. Okay, you've got the job. But the reality is for the most part, I'm able to just make the best choice that I can, pick the most qualified person or the person who feels like I'm going to vibe with the most. And it's just turned out to be a pretty diverse slate over the last 10 years. I've worked with both men and women and people of, probably every different ethnicity. And it just hasn't been something that I've had to calculate or sort of will into being. It's just picking the best person has produced a pretty diverse slate. And the answer is yes, I have seen it get better. I know, when I was an assistant, and we're talking about 20, 25 years ago, I literally worked for people who said that they were only going to hire men to work with, and that was because that was just not something that they were going to be talked out of. And I certainly have not had a conversation like that or heard a conversation like that in a solid 10 to 15 years. So it has gotten better. I think, you know, in terms of how to continue to make it better, I mean, I participate in a diversity mentorship group that is run through the Editors Guild. I'm in touch with people who are part of the sort of counterpart group that is run through the American Cinema Editors. And those are fabulous networking groups. They are open to everyone, but they put an emphasis on you know, women trying to get into the business and or, you know, trying to come up in the business. I mean, they're already in the business, but they're at a certain level and trying to move up, and people of color. And those groups facilitate a lot of interaction and social activity among. It's a great networking forum, and provides an opportunity for people to figure out who the best possible candidates are among all different kinds of people. So.
Thank you, Darrin. That's really helpful. And if you're comfortable sharing that membership group, the name of it in the chat, I think that people would be interested in that.
Yeah, I mean, I can share it. I mean, both of those groups are sort of for people who are already working in the business, like as assistant editors at a minimum. I know that there are also more expansive groups. There's they call, I believe it was called the blue collar post-production group. There are others that are more run through social media on Facebook and things like that, that are a bit more open to people who haven't yet made the move into the business. But yes, we can talk about that chat.
Another thing, we're winding down our production. Another thing to consider is, once getting your foot in the door, I make a point on everything to find 2 people on set. They might not work anywhere near me. I might not even really know their last name, but if I watch them throughout the production and hustle, today brought 2 women into my office that I've seen on set. They're not in my department. And I just sat them down and made a 10-minute conversation. And I said, this is my email. What do you want to do? What departments do you like? What have you watched? What's cool? Keep in touch. Let me know how I can help you. And I really try to mean it when I say it, so that when I do get an email from them in the next couple of months, if I do, I can be helpful in some way, because that's how it worked for me. And I think you have to be nice to the people that are your interns, because you will be working for them at some point. So you really try to identify people that are working hard at any level and just making sure that they get opportunities. That doesn't solve the problem of making sure that you hire the most diverse people, but it does, once you see somebody's work ethic in person, I think you really owe it to them to give them an opportunity. Even if it's small, it can be meaningful.
Thank you, Annabelle. That's really wonderful to hear. Mike.
I think things are getting better in the industry. You know, I think there's a long way to go, but you know, there's definitely a lot of initiatives to, you know, push that forward for sure. And I think it's getting better.
I agree. I think it's getting better too. And I think sometimes, I mean, I don't know if I can just, I think sometimes when things are done in a rush and not enough candidates are seen, then that's a problem. And so just, I know, Thomas, when we were speaking about like what things could be done to make it better, I think if films just continue to make thoughtful choices and take their time, making sure they're reviewing enough candidates, I think that gives a lot better opportunity for more diverse candidates to come forward and get an opportunity to be seen. If anyone else, if there's nothing else to be added, Thomas, if you want to open it up to questions.
Well, I'll just add anecdotally that for 2 productions in a row, I had someone in mind that I wanted to, 2 different people who I wanted to bring along to a show. And not because they were young women of color, but they happened to be young women of color. And I, you know, and I went to them and said, hey, I'm starting this thing. I'd really like to work with you again. You know, or they had been an assistant to somebody else on the show that I was on. And I said, I'd like to bring you with me to this other production. And 2 shows in a row, the response I got was, "That sounds really interesting. I'll get back to you." And both of them turned me down. So, so the things have gotten better, certainly in that regard, where sometimes like that really, really desirable assistant editor or assistant anything who also happens to check some diversity boxes is actually entertaining multiple offers. And I was on the losing end of those multiple offers 2 shows in a row. So yes, things are getting better in a number of demonstrable ways.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all. Thank you, Shannon. I'm going to open it up to the students now if they have any questions. If, like I said before we began, if you want to speak to the panel directly, please raise your hand, Zoom style. I see some hands up right now, and we'll just call on you in order. And then if you want to ask a question via chat, you can do that too, and we'll read your question from the chat. So I saw James Scott put his hands up first. So James.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. My question is for Mr. Upton, and I'm curious, when you're in pre-production, planning, and budgeting, what are the most common areas that you notice where surprises occur during production, and how you plan for those, kind of just beyond padding the budget in certain areas?
Well, I mean, I guess, like I said, I come on very early on the projects where I'm a guesser, right? So I do a lot of guessing, reading the script. I break the scripts down. But after having done a lot of movies, like, you become a really good guesser, right? But I think the key is to be malleable, right? Because ultimately then the director is going to be there, and it's really all about what they want. So we are then sort of constantly reinventing the plan, and it all is trying to still fit within the plan, and yet it needs to be malleable at all times. And I think what happens is you will have planned to do something, but in actuality, like for this movie, right, we were going to go on location for part of it for 1 or 2 days, and there was a lot of money that was allocated towards transportation and that kind of stuff. Turns out we built that on stage, and we stayed parked the whole time, and we were 50 yards away from our production office. And so you're able to take that money, apply it to the construction. And this is sort of an example of, you're constantly looking at every sort of line item and like, well, do we really need that much money for this? Can we allocate it over here? Because it's really what the plan needs to be. And that's, I find kind of the way it works for me. Hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you. Ian, you had your hand up.
Hello, my question is for Annabelle and Mike. I was wondering, how do you know where and when your job kind of begins, if there's like a landmark in production, such as a director being attached to the project, or do you begin at different points depending on the project?
Yeah, you begin at different points. This one, for example, I started about a year ago. It was over dinner with our director, and he had an idea. He wanted to remake this movie, and he has a lot of access, but he just had not been able to figure out the rights to the script, which belonged in the same family as the rights to the underlying source material, which is something you deal with a lot as a producer. Is if they're not writing an original screenplay, you are figuring out who owns what and how much you have to pay them in order to make your version of that. And so that's where we got started. And once we sort of untangled the various rights, and figured out how much they were going to get cost, we were hit the ground running, and then we went and sold it. I mean, you could do it a lot of different ways. A lot of people get somebody important attached, like an important talent person or an important director, in order to have it, you know, seen by a lot of people. But because we had a director with so much respect and history and a lot of interest in anything he was going to do, that's where we started. And then we were able to go and sell it.
For me, you know, I get a lot of balls in the air, to be honest with you. It's like I will be doing, you know, 4 or 5 different budgets for different projects. Some of them never go, some of them do go. And, you know, those are people who are all trying to get it going in the right direction, right? And so, you know, they may be looking at the tax credit and figuring out how much money the tax credit is, and if they can actually get the tax credit, and that may be the last piece of their financing that they need. Or they may be presenting a plan to a studio and they need a budget and a plan that fits the number that the studio has said, yeah, you deliver it with these people and this amount of money, we'll do it. And so you're trying to figure those things out. Like I said, some of them don't go, some of them do. And so, you know, a lot of the time between movies for me is this kind of stuff that's like just planning and trying to figure stuff out.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next up is Chris.
Hi, I actually had a question for Len. I just got this in the mail, so I'm excited to read the article that you were involved in. But I'm an assistant camera, and I want to become a DP one day. And I'm just curious as to your position, like how creative is your position as opposed to a gaffer, and how much communication do you have between you and the DP?
Okay, good question. So first of all, the best article is it's on the website. But communication with the DP is insane. So I am a gaffer. I put chief lighting technician. So I think it's as creative as you want to make it, and you develop your career by the relationships with people that you hook up with. You search out people that are creative. Like I am the DP from Avatar. I met him on Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5. Like we've done 18 movies together, and it's a great collaboration. So yeah, we make it together. I mean, I never really felt like the blank canvas was my thing. I didn't feel like I could, I couldn't talk to the director and get what he wanted. I have a lot of trouble understanding what directors are saying sometimes. Sometimes I don't, but it's a DP's job to always do that. And I'm really good at understanding cameraman and light. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. Thank you. I'll make sure to check out the article.
And by the way, if you want to connect afterwards, get a hold of Thomas maybe, and there's stuff in there. I mean, I think camera is assistant camera is a great way to be monitoring the set. You're right in there and you're in every frame, but you're so concentrated on your focus, you're not really paying attention to the whole thing. Frequently, I don't even see operators really paying attention to the whole thing. The DIT does. He's watching everything. But on the creative side, well, Eric Messerschmidt, for his first movie that he shot, won an Academy Award. Anyway, just saying, I think lighting is pretty creative.
Thank you.
Yeah, Len, did you know Eric is a Emerson alum? Did you name that?
I did not know that.
Okay.
I did
he's
not
Emerson.
know that.
Yeah. So yeah, glad you name dropped him. So we have a couple more minutes. If anyone else has any questions, please raise your hand. Or we got one. Jacob.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Okay, cool. It's just a question for all you guys, actually. What is the most satisfying part of your job? Like, what's your favorite aspect or like part of production development?
I'll go. I think the most satisfying thing is something. It doesn't have just to do with sound, but sometimes when you just know when every single thing seemed to work out right, like it looks great, it's in focus. There's all these moving parts that are going all the time. The sound's right. The light, there's every once in a while you just feel and you just go, okay, I know they're going to use that take and they're going to put that into the movie because it just felt like it. You just saw everything and there was like nothing wrong with it. And whenever that happens, I tell my people, I said, did you guys feel that? Did you, they go, yeah. So every once in a while you did, like couple times a day, or it might only happen like once a week or whatever. But when it does happen, it's almost seemed like everybody knows that was just magic. Everything worked out exactly right because there are so many opportunities for things to go wrong. So when it does happen, it's really satisfying then.
Yeah, I'd say obviously like good results are always satisfying, right? If it turns out that you made a good movie, which is hard, and you get good reviews, or it does well, whatever ratings or box office, that's really satisfying. But in terms of the process, for me, the most satisfying thing has been to find collaborators who I want to work with over and over again, and I have found 2 or 3, mainly directors, some producers, with whom I've developed a degree of trust and a degree of like mind, of kind of shared values with regard to the kind of things that we want to do and create together, to the point where when I'm working with a director, like on the director's cut, we're in the room for weeks and weeks, and we start either finishing each other's sentences or getting to that point where we don't even need to say out loud what we're both thinking. We can watch a scene, look at each other and go, we know. And then I can just get to work. And because you get to the place where you're thinking with the same mind. And that sounds kind of woo-woo, but when you're in that zone, it's really, really nice. And you feel like, even regardless of what the end result of the process is going to be, that day-to-day interaction with someone who you share creative values with, and you're of like mind with, is the best part of the process for me.
I think a very underrated aspect of working in movies is there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you are not going to the same office every day with the same people, or Zooming from your house every day. You get to start something, you get to set people up to hopefully do the best job they can, and you get to watch them do a great job at whatever they're specialized to do. Just super cool to actually watch. And then you get to all be a part of it together, and then you're done and you say bye, and you might collaborate again, but you get to move on. And so because it's such a small amount of time, people give these laser focus to what they're doing. And that's an amazing place to get somebody when they're at the top of their game, and this is their only thing they're thinking about, which every person on the screen, they're in this project, and every day they're thinking about it. They're thinking about it at night when they go to sleep, and they've been thinking about it for a long time. Darrin's going to be thinking about it for months and months to come. And so that's awesome to get that side of somebody's focus and dedication. And so when you're on something like that, it's really great. It's a great way to work with people, because for the most part, everyone really wants to be there doing what they're doing, which is really cool. Very satisfying.
Okay, well, we'll have to end it there. We're past 7 p.m., but thank you so much for your questions. And thank you, panelists. Shannon, I'll turn it over to you. Any last words?
Yes, I just want to say thank you all so much to my coworkers for having a full day of work and coming out and doing this. And thank you, Thomas, for putting it together. Thanks to the California Film Commission and the Tax Incentive Program for connecting us. And thank you all, students who joined and asked questions. And Thomas, if there are any questions that a student has or thinks of in the coming week, feel free to email me and I'll do my best to get it answered on the side.
All right, thank you. Will do. So you heard Shannon. So you all know how to reach out to me. So please do if you have any follow-on questions. But yeah, like Shannon said, thank you, panelists. Thank you for spending time with us tonight. Thank you, students, for tuning in and showing up and participating. And again, thank you to the California Film Commission. Have a good night, everybody. And yeah, have a great week and good luck with the rest of the shoot.